Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do my son's last monthly bullet journal setup for 2024, and we're diving into one of the oldest and honestly one of the most haunting entities in the Magnus archives, the End. Now, the End is as old as time itself, and if you're thinking, isn't everything eventually going to end? Then you're kind of on the right track. The End is all about death, the literal end of things and the fear that comes with it. It's passive in the sense that it doesn't actively interfere in the world around it. Instead, it's there in the background, like the inevitable tick of a clock, waiting for everything to fall apart. The End often shows up through imagery that we associate with death, the dead, graveyards, and all the stuff that gives us the chills when we start thinking about what comes after. What's particularly creepy is its connection to dreams. There's this unnerving presence in our sleep, reminding us of our fragility, and somehow that ties directly to the End's power. Here's something that really got me. Oliver Banks, more on him in a minute, mentions that the End will be the last entity standing when all the others are gone. It's like at the end of all things, when everything else has crumbled, the End will just keep going until it too eventually fades away. Creepy, right? What's even more unsettling is the fact that the End doesn't have a known ritual. Peter Lucas suggests that it's because, well, death happens to everyone, and there's no need to remake the world when everything ends in the same way. No need to reinvent the wheel when we're all headed to the same destination. In the End, pun intended, the End has no real alliances. It doesn't need to, it doesn't connect with other entities because, well, it's the one that will eventually consume everything. No more connections, no more existence. It all just fades away. Speaking of Oliver Banks, let's take a closer look at this tragic figure. Oliver is an avatar of the End, meaning he's tied directly to death, and he has a pretty unsettling gift. He can see black tendrils connected to people who are about to die. Originally, he would see these tendrils in his dreams about 10 days before a person's death, but eventually this ability expanded into his waking life. A bit of backstory on Oliver. He had a boyfriend, Graham. Eventually they broke up, and around that time Oliver had a breakdown after working at the bank and he left his job. Not long after, his death-foreseeing dreams began. Eventually he took work in a magic shop selling crystals and tarot cards, where he was noticed by a character known as Jane Prentice, and he was gazing at her with deep sadness and even fear. In one encounter, Oliver approached Jennifer Ling in Soho, asking what she was listening to, though she wasn't wearing any headphones. He muttered something about protecting her hearing, likely because he saw the tendrils coming from her ears. By the time Oliver appeared at the Magnus Institute, he was using the fake name Antonio Blake. And then after the change, he gains his domain, the Corpse Roots, and theorizes on the nature of the ruined world. Quite a chilling figure, right? That's going to wrap up this cover page for December 2024 with the Magnus Archives at the end and our Oliver Blake character on the front. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the calendar setup, which is a typical grid calendar. So while I do that, we're going to talk about Magnus Archives episode 29, Cheating Death. This one is all about Nathaniel Thorpe, who, as it turns out, is a very unusual and tragic figure. Nathaniel was illiterate and had to have his statement recorded by someone else. He starts off with an eerie folk tale, one he claims explains his own story. The tale takes us to a bold soldier in New England during the Battle of Bunker Hill. After a night of drinking and faro, he flees the battle and ends up shot, seeking shelter in a cellar from the rain. The soldier meets none other than death itself, and of course, he challenges death to a game of chance for his life. While death offers chess, draughts, or dominoes, the soldier insists on faro. Death agrees, saying, "If you win, you shall not die." Faro is a classic gambling game that was popular in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's a game of chance where players bet on the outcome of a card drawn from a deck. The dealer sets up a tableau with a set of numbered cards, and players place their bets on which numbers they think will be drawn. The dealer then reveals cards from the deck, and players win or lose based on the numbers that come up. They play for what seems like ages, and the soldier in the end wins by palming his bet. But as he stands victorious, death laughs. And then something strange happens. Muscle and blood begin to reform on Death's old bones. The soldier's flesh starts to peel away, and eventually Death is restored to its original monk-like form. In turn, the soldier becomes like Death, lifeless and decaying. At this point, Nathaniel interrupts his statement to prove his point. He cuts off his own finger, revealing that he was that soldier. For 2 centuries, he existed in a lifeless state. He explains that there are other deaths who go to people on the verge of death, but also kill others, even those who aren't dying. Eventually, Nathaniel was freed through a game of roulette, and his flesh returned to him. However, by the time of this statement, he's been flesh again for 2 years, but food and drink make him sick, and he can't sleep. What's more, he craves something, though he can't quite figure out what. The most chilling detail comes next. Fiona Law, who recorded his statement, tragically died from complications during a liver transplant. Elias, meanwhile, confirms that he worked as a filing clerk at the time and remembers rumors of someone self-harming during the statement. Nathaniel's statement also included an old bone hexagonal token used for Pharaoh, which, when Jonathan Sims picks it up, crumbles to dust. So yeah, Nathaniel Thorpe's tale is one of death, decay, and unsettling immortality. That is going to wrap up our creepy calendar for December, and we're moving on to one of Kenny's favorite spreads, which is just a blank notes page, as well as his finance tracker. And to do that, we are going to talk about Magnus Archives episode 121, Far Away. This episode picks up with Oliver Banks again, and if you thought his story couldn't get more intense, well, think again. So Oliver continues to recount his experiences with prophetic dreams of death, something we heard about back on the cover page. He explains how at first these dreams were the only place he saw the pulsing vines that foretold someone's death. But soon they start appearing in his waking hours as well, and every time he brushes against one of these vines, he feels this cold, terrible chill. It's too much to bear, so he isolates himself, trying to avoid seeing people's fates. But as you can probably guess, no matter how hard he tries, he cannot escape it. Then comes the weird part. Oliver discovers Point Nemo, the most isolated place on Earth, far away from any civilization. It becomes his obsession, this place where he can escape it all. But of course, the vines won't let him have that peace. He can't even visit it in his dreams. But then things take a dark turn. Oliver learns that a member of a scientific team heading to Point Nemo, a chemist named Dr. Thomas Pritchard, is fated to die in a motorcycle accident. So what does Oliver do? He steals Pritchard's identity, disposes of the body, and takes his place on the voyage. For a while, it seems like things are finally looking up for him. He gets to enjoy the emptiness of the sea, dreamless sleep, and some peace, something he hasn't had in so long. But when they finally reach Point Nemo, the vines return, massive and towering out of the sea, and start engulfing the entire crew. In that moment, Oliver experiences a terrible clarity. He realizes his true purpose. He's meant to embrace the end. He hijacks the boat, kills the captain, and forces the remaining crew to take the ship toward the origin of the vines. But before they get there, satellite debris falls from the sky, striking the boat and killing everyone on board, including Oliver himself. The episode wraps with Oliver speaking to John's comatose body, telling him that he still has a choice to make. John, our librarian, is stuck in this in-between state, too human to be claimed by death, but not human enough to survive. And he can't move forward until he decides whether to embrace the I like Oliver embraced the end. The I was our entity for June. It's a chilling moment that leaves you wondering, will John make the same choice? And that's Far Away, another haunting chapter in Oliver's story. Alright, we are ready to go ahead and move on to the first set of weeklies, and we're setting these up just like we've been doing the weeklies for most of the year. And in this, we are going to dive into episode 94, Dead Woman Walking, which introduces us to one of the most unsettling avatars of the end, Jane Doe, a reanimated medical cadaver. This episode follows Georgie as she navigates a sense of alienation at university. Surrounded by wealth, classically educated peers, The only person who really makes her feel at home is Alex, who grew up in the Black Country and industrial area of the West Midlands. Things take a strange turn when protests begin at the medical science building, and suddenly lecturers are rescheduling classes. Georgie notices that there are no police around, but Alex seems unusually interested in the situation. The next day, Alex demands to meet Georgie, looking extremely tired. When they visit the building, they find the protesters lying on the floor in a catatonic state, staring blankly upward, their bodies collapsed away from an almost naked woman standing in their midst. The woman looks strangely familiar to Georgie. She recognizes her as one of the cadavers used for medical lectures. The next Saturday, George and Alex return to the building, only to find it now swarmed with faculty members and police, all of whom have a strange gray pallor to their skin. The cadaver is now kneeling, and she slowly rises. She walks toward the two of them. Alex lunges forward, grabbing the corpse, desperately demanding to know what it wants. The cadaver leans into Alex's ear and whispers something that causes Alex to lose the spark in her eyes. She simply lies down, unresponsive. Then the cadaver whispers to Georgie, and despite covering her ears, the chilling words reach her. The moment that you die will feel exactly the same as this one. This whisper reveals a terrifying truth to Georgie. Everything, every life, every moment is contained in that single instant of death. It's an overwhelming revelation about the end of everything, and for a moment, Georgie glimpses the sheer smallness of the universe. Moving on to the second set of weeklies, and we're going to take a look at one of the most chilling artifacts connected to the end, the Book of the Dead. Now, don't confuse this with Mary Key's Catalog of the Trapped Dead. This is something far more personal and infinitely more terrifying. The Book of the Dead is an untitled, paranormal book with a dark purpose. It predicts the owner's death in vivid, gruesome detail. What's particularly unsettling about this book is that it has no known author. There's no clear source for this cursed text, and that only adds to its mystery. Instead of a title, the cover features a chilling quote. "Life is a current which cannot be fought. It is a march with one destination. You cannot cease your step nor move your course to one that skirts the journey's termination." Right beneath this quote, there's a handwritten note that says, "You have already read too much." Now, if that doesn't make your skin crawl, I don't know what will. The book starts with a few pages written in handwritten Latin, but the language slowly shifts into Middle English, and eventually it changes into Contemporary English, making it feel like this text has been written across time. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. The book doesn't just predict your death, it catalogs it. The pages describe the cause of your death in gruesome detail, and every time you read it, the date draws closer, and the manner of your death seems to change, as though your fate is adjusting in real time. The more you read, the closer your death seems to get. The book is like a ticking clock that won't stop, no matter how much you try to avoid it. It's almost as if reading it accelerates your own demise, forcing you to confront the inescapable truth that your end is written, and it's always coming. This book is an avatar of the end itself, unrelenting, unchangeable, and inevitable. The more you read, the more you realize there's no way to outrun it, no way to change your fate. Your journey has one destination, and this book will make sure you know exactly how you'll reach it. So would you dare to open it? Or would you heed that note on the cover and walk away before it's too late? That is it for the pairs of weeklies, but we do need to squeak in a little tiny 5th week for the end of December. We're going to do that on our summary pages alongside his playlist. And while we do that, let's dive into episode 155, Cost of Living, where we meet Tova McHugh, a woman who made a seemingly impossible bargain with death. Tova wants to make it clear right from the start that she's not a selfish person. In fact, she insists that the work she's done in the world, financing a homeless initiative that housed 8,000 people, funding drug projects, organizing violence reduction programs, and employing hundreds, has done more good than harm. She's built a life that she's proud of, and yet, her survival comes at a cost: the lives of others. Tova has always tried to live a healthy life, but her world took a dark turn when, just a month before her wedding, she had an epileptic seizure at the top of a staircase and fell, cracking her head open. When she lost consciousness, she entered a dark, cold place, something she had never feared before, being agnostic. She had always thought that death meant nothingness, but now she realized that there was more to it. She was aware of her absence, and it terrified her. Then, out of nowhere, she found herself back in the light, in an operating room. Her heart had stopped beating and the doctor was performing CPR. As she tried desperately to reach for her own body, something strange happened. She reached into the doctor's chest and felt the calm beating of his heart. Filled with rage that he could be so calm while she was dying, her anger seemed to flow into him, causing the doctor to collapse and convulse on the floor. At that moment, her heart began to beat again. She awoke in a hospital bed, but soon learned that the doctor who had treated her had died of a heart attack. At first, she wrote it off as a bizarre near-death experience, but as time passed, the truth began to sink in. She wasn't simply coming back from death. She was taking the lives of others to keep going. The next year, she had another near-death life experience after slipping in the shower, and she realized that she could extend her life by taking someone else's. This time, an old woman in the park became her victim, and the woman was found dead shortly after. Tova began to understand the mechanics of it. The more loved and connected someone was, the longer their life would extend hers. So she started taking lives to keep going, first the old, then the young, justifying her actions to herself as necessary for her survival. Eventually, she took an infant born into poverty, thinking that it would spare the child a life of suffering. But the truth was even more horrifying. It wasn't about age or health. It was about connection. The more loved ones someone had, the more time they could give her. Tova has taken countless lives to sustain her own. She insists that despite it all, she's done so much good for the world. In the end, we are all bound to the inevitability of death. The end exists as a force that claims all things, a constant reminder that everything, every life, every story, every moment will eventually fade. Whether through the Book of the Dead, Oliver Banks' journey through death's embrace, or Tova McHugh's calculated survival, we're reminded that death isn't just an end. It's a force that shapes everything. It consumes, it transforms, and in the end, it leaves us to confront the darkness that comes with knowing we cannot avoid what is inevitable. But for us, the end is not quite the end. We have one more entity from the Magnus archives to explore in Kenny's year-end wrap-up. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.